Testing 1, 2, 3. Welcome, early birds. Let me know in the chat room if you can see and hear me okay. I want to say welcome to Shalom 2015, Doug Diamond from Diamond Digital Media, Deborah, Andy, of course. Lots of posts in there already from Andy. Eileen, welcome. Haven't seen you for a little while. Good to have you back. Sherry, welcome. Dr. Darnell, been a long time. Thank you for coming back. And I think we covered everybody there, so let me know. Can you see and hear? Deborah says good. Andy says good. Dr. Darnell says good. And QI or QL, that's new. Okay, welcome QL. Welcome. Alrighty, we're going to get started here in just about 2 minutes. For those of you that are new to the group, QL and a few others, we start off with a little short 15-minute headline segment that we're doing now for the benefit of not only patrons, but also for our good friends over at Caravan to Midnight. We have a few folks in here that are caravanners, as they are known. Get some light on the subject here, not that it does any better. But anyway, we'll do 15 minutes of headlines, and this is going to be, of course, as some of you have seen, this has to do with Turkey. And we'll be focusing on the U.S. Air Force Base in Sirleck, and talking about the 50 nuclear warheads that are there and what that sort of portends for the chess game, the chessboard, the players. And we will also be talking a little bit about my history with nuclear warheads in West Germany in the 70s. So if you'll allow me, I will pontificate, as we often say, about my military history, just a little. I'm not going to tell you war stories or anything like that, but keep it focused on the technology, which is what we try to do here. Okay? Q for quaint. You're very, very quick on the draw tonight, Andy. All right. And by the way, we will leave some time at the end of the conversation this evening for questions. So Andy always has lots of questions, but anyone else, of course, happy to field them if I can, if I'm able to, and I'm always straight with you when I'm not able to. Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. Doug Diamond from Diamond Digital Media, who keeps the wheels on the aircraft for Patch Air, and we will be taxiing out here in just a moment. Doug, as always, I'll give you a 1, 2, 3, and we'll go right into the news segment. And I'm going to get my notes open here. Alrighty. So, without further ado, we'll do the countdown and we'll go right into our headlines for the 15 minutes. 1, 2, and 3. Welcome. My name is Anthony Patch, and providing you today's science headlines, we're going to be talking a little bit about nuclear warheads in Syria, specifically in Turkey, but involving Syria. No, there's no bombing going on. But we do have some updates regarding the situation there, but I'm going to be focusing in on the technology of nuclear warheads as they pertain to what is stored in Turkey at the U.S. Air Base there. In Sirleck is our U.S. Air Force Base in the heart of Turkey itself. We're going to be reviewing some of the controversial aspects of those nukes remaining in Turkey. And this is a conversation, this is a debate that's been going on for several years. And I would like to start off with the announcement just came through about 5 hours ago that Vice President Pence announces Turkey has agreed to temporary ceasefire in Syria. And this is coming to us by way of Axios. So this is a 10-day ceasefire. Mike Pence and Secretary of State Pompeo were in Turkey to negotiate this, and Pompeo's on his way to meet with Netanyahu tomorrow, on Friday, as we are doing this broadcast on Thursday, the 17th of October. So for caravanners, this may be coming out next week. It'll be old news for you, I guess, unless it's broadcast tomorrow. Not sure exactly when it will be broadcast, this news segment. But things are a little fluid. We're kind of getting the logistics sorted out with me as the science officer over there with John B. Wells. But at any rate, that's good news that Vice President Pence and Secretary of State Pompeo have been able to negotiate that ceasefire. I'll be going through that with my patrons this evening in our live stream for the balance of the 2-hour live stream to discuss the details and my commentary on this ceasefire and what it may portend, but also what it means to have nuclear warheads, 50 of them, stored in Turkey at our U.S. Air Base. And what is the strategic implications for those warheads at this particular time? Okay, so another touch point, another reference for you is dated November of 2017, but still germane to today's events. This comes to us from Arms Control Association. U.S. nuclear weapons in Turkey raise alarm. And back in November of 2017, I'll just give you the first paragraph. Deteriorating relations between the United States and Turkey have prompted a growing debate about the wisdom of maintaining U.S. tactical nuclear weapons in the Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey, and more broadly about whether to remove all such weapons from Europe. So as you can see, this is nothing new, this debate, and it actually extends back even further than 2017. But this is a very touchy issue because you may have already heard earlier this week that Turkey was threatening to hold these weapons hostage. Now, this is a joint operation between the United States and the Turkish armed forces, but make no mistake about it, the United States Air Force, their security forces, are the ones responsible for maintaining absolute control over these weapons, not the Turks. And this is U.S. property. Therefore, it is quite remarkable to hear a NATO ally, Turkey, saying that they're going to hold our weapons hostage. Well, hopefully that's calmed down now that we have a 10-day ceasefire that's been announced, that's been negotiated. Again, the details will follow in the live stream. Now, I'd like to take you back to 2018. In March of 2018, this comes to us by way of Debka Weekly, and this is entitled, "The U.S. No Longer Needs Incirlik Air Base or a Turkish Ally." And pictured here is Russian President Vladimir Putin shaking hands with Erdogan and celebrating the purchase by Turkey of the S-400 anti-aircraft missile system. So it begs the question, why is Turkey still a NATO member? Why haven't the members excommunicated from NATO, Turkey itself? Because understand, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization exists for the purpose of defending the NATO allies, Greater Western Europe, from Russia. And now you have a NATO member who has purchased a Russian missile defense system. Rather strange bedfellows, to say the least. Now, this is from October of this year, this article from Federation of American Scientists. Their headline is, "Urgent, Move U.S. Nuclear Weapons Out of Turkey." Now, these are specifically the B-61 nuclear bomb. I was stationed in the 70s in West Germany, when it still was East and West Germany, and was responsible for W-70 nuclear weapons, and I'll be sharing that with the patrons this evening, what the comparison between these weapon systems are. But there are 50, and again, I'm citing the source here, is the Federation of American Scientists, 50 B-61 nuclear bomb stored at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. And we'll be going through the details of what they have to say on that. Now, here's a tweet that came out today, and this has to do with the security forces at the airbase. At Incirlik, the 31st Security Forces Squadron from Aviano, Italy, were also deployed to Incirlik, Turkey to beef up nuclear security in response to, quote, regional turmoil and government instability, according to a U.S. Air Force source. This was just posted on the 15th. Continuing in this, nuclear surety inspections at Incirlik, Turkey include security police demonstration of, quote, recapture and recover team tactics in case a nuclear weapon is stolen. Now, this comes under the heading of this holding of U.S. nuclear warheads hostage by the Turkish military. So there were additional forces that were deployed from Italy to bolster those security forces at Incirlik. And when they talk about nuclear surety inspections, this is S-U-R-E-T-Y, not security, but surety. And this is the same system that I was involved with in West Germany, was nuclear surety program. So we'll be detailing what all that entails from a first-hand perspective of my own that continues today. Basically, it hasn't really changed in terms of the procedures for securing these weapons. Although at Incirlik, unlike West Germany, we had them in above-ground bunkers. They are, at least in Turkey, they are below ground. Okay? Now, interestingly, the nuclear security, not surety, but nuclear security at Incirlik, Turkey, has been somewhat compromised because the $44 million nuclear security intrusion detection system was transferred to the Turkish Ministry of Defense to improve external security of the airbase. Again, this was posted on the 15th. So, really strange goings on there, and in fact, it's also indicated from this source from William Arkin on Twitter that the base had 3,500 law enforcement incidents of all types just this year, with 19 of these requiring dispatching of mobile security teams. That's something that I had intimate experience with in West Germany. So, I just want to highlight to you that the B-61 nuclear bomb is not a very large device, if you will. I want to show you a picture of this device because, you know, we think of a nuclear bomb and we think of things like Hiroshima and Nagasaki with Big Boy and Fat Man and Little Boy. These are small devices, as you can see in this picture here. The one at the bottom was the W-70 that I was involved with in West Germany. This was on a Lance missile system on a mobile carrier. This is the B-63 of today, and very small, and is typically loaded into an F-15 or an F-16 fighter aircraft. So it doesn't require huge strategic bombers and that type of thing that you may be more familiar with. Okay? Let's see if we can show you here's an F-15 carrying one in the center here. These are wing tanks out here, but one device in the belly of the aircraft, and this is lifting off from Turkey. Okay? If you'd like to see an image of the airbase, it's fairly large, and this will give you an idea of what's going on, the scope and scale of things. This is a Google image that shows where the devices are stored. Again, they're underground, okay? But this is a NATO area. This is Incirlik Air Base. in Turkey, and it's actually, surrounded by the greater metropolitan area. It's not way out in some desolate location. This is an image of what it looks like on the ground. You have the above ground shelters, but below grade are the weapons. And you can see here a C-17, and there's some activity here related to moving the warheads to the aircraft and security forces that are deployed. So just to give you kind of an idea, but this is a picture of where Incirlik Air Force Base is located in Turkey, and the remaining bases here, these are all NATO bases where nuclear warheads are presently deployed by U.S. forces. These are U.S. weapons deployed in Western Europe, and that includes in West Germany at Buchel Air Base and Ramstein Air Base. So that's just a quick snapshot of what's going on. The purpose of these headlines is for you to go and research any item of interest for yourself. If you'd like to join us in our live streams, you can go to Patreon, Anthony Patch, type it into the search engine. John B. Wells and I have been talking the last couple of days about more scheduling of these live streams and these news updates. I hope you find them informative. I don't cover a lot in 15 minutes, just give you the headlines, of course, but this may expand into a longer, broader conversation. And also, John and I are scheduling an opportunity for John to be a guest here on the Patreon live streams that we conduct 3 times a week, Sunday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 2 hours apiece, sometimes longer. But I'll let you know about that, and John will be joining in with a demographic, a group over on Patreon that is very much alike with you on Caravan to Midnight. So it just seems like a natural fit. And John and I have been friends for many years, and I've been a guest on his show many, many times, including Arc Midnight on Saturdays. So with that, we'll kind of wrap this one up very quick, fast-paced. Don't want to belabor the point too much. And welcome to Patreon. And I know that many people on Caravan to Midnight, the Caravanners, have already been contacting me by email and saying this is a good fit. So thank you very much, and good evening. Okay, Doug, we'll make an edit right there. Patrons, thank you very much again for allowing me the opportunity to do something different, and I hope that gives you a quick snapshot as well. And we'll move right along. I'm going to check the chat room, see if there's anything urgent going on. Tamara is here. Very good. I hope you got my response to your email. Andy, the question, am I actually concerned about nukes? No. But these are chess pieces, and so we're going to, and again, excellent, insightful question, Andy. I will give you my conjecture right up front before we get into the details. Andy, let's go ahead and address it. Let's look at the strategy of what we're talking about here. And for that, I'll go ahead and put this map up again. There it is. Okay. Just so we have something to reference. Now we've got Incirlik Air Base down here in Turkey, and this is the island of Cyprus that I highlight in my second book, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough. And then of course we have Israel, barely visible right down in here, and then we have Syria and the border between Turkey and Syria, just so that we're all familiar. The issue as I see it is that Turkey has already cozied up to Russia. Again, here's that image. These are the S-400, and we'll get into some of the technical aspects on this missile system as we go along. But this is a huge violation. I mean, basically, Erdogan has violated the NATO rules by purchasing this missile system from Russia. I mean, this is just thumbing his nose at all the NATO allies. So what my expectation is that Turkey is going to throw the doors open to Russia for the purpose of taking a spoil. Turkey needs Russia in order to move through Syria, which Turkey wants. They want the oil and natural gas, as does Russia, in Syria, and they need Syria in order to build a pipeline. And this is not oftentimes discussed. But what Russia is seeking is a natural gas pipeline so that they can tap into Syrian natural gas, but more importantly, the natural gas, the largest in that part of the world natural gas field, possibly the largest natural gas field in the world, is offshore of Israel. It's known as the Leviathan natural gas field. Turkey and Russia want to access the Leviathan natural gas fields offshore. These are under the seabed, extending between Israel and Cyprus. Again, I've cautioned you, I've alerted you to pay attention to Cyprus, because the northern half of Cyprus is controlled, it's occupied by Turkey. There is a demilitarized zone separating the north from the south on the island of Cyprus, and the Cypriots control the southern portion. Well, who else is in the southern portion? Russia. Russia has a naval base, a naval port, military port, on the southern end of Cyprus. This is part of why I've cautioned you to pay attention to Cyprus. This is all about controlling the Leviathan gas fields and running a pipeline from Israel straight up through the north into Syria and then distributing to Western Europe. It's critical for the economy of Russia. Therefore, my expectation is that Russia and Turkey will become allies. Turkey will voluntarily, in my view, they will voluntarily separate themselves from NATO. So watch for that to happen. This purchase of the S-400 portends that strategic move by Turkey. What does this mean for Israel? Well, it's pretty obvious. This is Gog-Magog. So it isn't so much Syria, it's not so much the Kurds, it isn't so much the ceasefire that I just brought to your attention. This has more to do with Russia joining Turkey and then moving on Israel. Recognize that Syria is just a staging point. This is why Isaiah talks about the destruction of Damascus. It will cease to exist overnight. Now, where do the nukes fit into this? Again, Andy's question. Imagine you are responsible for the nukes at Incirlik. And now you are, because you are physically surrounded by Turkish military forces and civilians, what it would be like on that military airbase in terms of trying to ensure the security of those nuclear warheads, 50 of them, from falling into the hands not just of the Turks, but the Russians. The U.S. is not going to stand for this. The U.S. needs to airlift these warheads. And I have personal experience with airlifting nuclear warheads, and I'll share some of that with you later on. The only nuke exchange that I expect to see is what is described regarding the destruction of Damascus. Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49. I've long held to the notion that Israel would first be attacked, but almost simultaneously, nearly preemptive, but not preemptive, but simultaneous response to being attacked from the north. And it appears it's going to be Russia, Turkey, and Iran, because there are over 100,000 Iranian troops in southern Syria. We also have 2 large military bases in southern Syria. We had 2 smaller ones in the north, which were for special operations troops. And they were ordered to withdraw from there, as you know, ostensibly leaving the Kurds to themselves, but I'll give you some more background on that. But just yesterday, our U.S. Air Force sent in 2 fighter jets, fighter bombers, that attacked our former military installations to destroy special operations equipment, data, and ammunition dumps and other materiel, so as not to fall into the hands, and this is specific, so as not to fall into the hands of Russian forces already in Syria, especially the Spetsnaz, the special forces. So there were some small installations that were already abandoned, and that special operations people took their highly sensitive equipment and code information, their encrypted information from those locations, and then special forces from Russia moved in. Now, there was no attack against these personnel. It was strictly the ammunition dumps and some areas of storage of military equipment that were attacked by 2 of our fighter jets that struck these areas, again, to prevent them from falling into the hands of the Russians. So again, my expectation here, I don't think is too far off base. That Turkey is going to disavow itself, is going to pull out of NATO, is going to be a bona fide ally with Russia. Russia is rapidly going to increase its military presence, not just in the north, but in the southern portion of Syria where we have bases, which means that we're going to further pull out of Syria. Because when Israel is attacked in this Damascus scenario, and they already have intelligence on the ground, human intel in Syria, they have electronic surveillance capabilities, such that when an attack is launched, be they missiles, aircraft, ground forces, whatever, Israel will know very soon that an attack is about to be launched. And this is why I say it's almost like a preemptive, but on the world stage, Israel needs to respond, not attack. They need to appear to have a defensive posture and a defensive reaction to being attacked from the north. What will Israel use? It has always been, for many, many years now, my expectation that they will launch tactical nuclear warheads, missiles. And that will obliterate Damascus. Why Damascus? Because below ground are the command and control centers for the Syrian army. The city itself above grade basically is already uninhabitable. But it's the ground penetrating, the bunker busting nuclear warheads that we have and Israel have, that are able to penetrate through the soil, penetrate through many, many feet of concrete, reinforced concrete, and then within the bunker itself detonate the tactical nuke. These are the kinds of nuclear devices that are in the bunkers below ground at Incirlik in Turkey. The U.S. will do everything diplomatically and militarily, not only to secure those warheads, but anticipate. There will very soon be announced, and it'll be after the event. We won't know about it ahead of time. But there will be a report that the nukes have been airlifted out, because the discussions have been going on for over 3 years, perhaps longer, about moving them out, and where would they be moved to? Back to the U.S. or to a friendly NATO country? You can appreciate that if you're bringing them to a friendly NATO country, you have to have the facilities to secure them, the infrastructure, the bunkers, the personnel. And I will detail to you what nuclear surety, S-U-R-E-T-Y, entails as we move on in this conversation. It's not a matter of just putting them on, C-130s and other transport aircraft like that and flying them out. Even though they're small, it's not the weapon itself. And again, I'll get into that. So anticipate we will hear after the fact that those nukes have been moved out. Because you can certainly appreciate it's not so much the Turks that were worried about being able to get their hands on the nukes and then airlift them and use them. These are not missile type warheads, as I showed you in the picture, and I'll show you again. This is dropped from a fighter jet. Very small, very compact. It's about 10 feet in length. Okay? Versus the W-70 that I was involved with on the Lance missile was launched from this missile launcher, a mobile artillery piece. So the B-61 is very small, but the Turks do not have aircraft that are equipped to load this missile, this bomb. It's not a missile drop. This is a dropped device. It's the Russians. Could you imagine the outcry if we allowed 50 nukes to fall into the hands of the Russians? So this is why I'm focusing on this tonight. This is not really being discussed, and all we hear is impeach Trump because of a telephone call with the Ukrainian prime minister or president or whatever he is about Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. Give me a break. Let's talk about securing nuclear warheads. So I was very pleased to see that Vice President Pence and Secretary of State Pompeo were able to negotiate a 10-day ceasefire. So let's start with that after we go to Scripture, because that was a very long answer to Andy's question. I want to go to Scripture first. It's important that we have that to start us off. So if you would please go to Matthew 14, 21. Oh, not Matthew 14. I'm sorry. Matthew 24. We're in Matthew 24 itself tonight. Let me correct that. Okay. Matthew 24. Verses 21 to 27. Verse 21. For at that time there will be great tribulation, unmatched from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be seen again. If those days had not been cut short, nobody would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. At that time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders that would deceive even the elect, if that were possible. See, I have told you in advance. Verse 26. So if they tell you, there he is in the wilderness, do not go out. Or, here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. That's our backdrop to what's going on with Syria and Turkey, the Russians, the Iranians, and Israel. Because as these things develop, it's heightening the tension, heightening the stress in the Middle East, in that area particularly. And it will get to the point, at some point, in which the world cries out for a Savior. And this is when the Antichrist makes a covenant, a false peace, claiming to be Christ, and with many saying, look, here's the Christ, or there he is. And we are told in Matthew, do not believe it. So we can see the stage is being set right now for this. Let's go to verse 42 in Matthew 24. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day on which your Lord will come. But understand this, if the homeowner had not known in which watch of the night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. For this reason you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour you do not expect. Let's go to this ceasefire. Turkish President Recep Erdogan previously said that he would never agree to a ceasefire after the U.S. withdrawal from northern Syria paved the way for Turkey to begin a military assault on U.S. allied Kurdish forces that they view as terrorists. This is coming to us today from Axios. Okay? Put myself back on camera while we're reading this. Just briefly, you already get the picture. The big breakthrough came after 5 hours of negotiations between Pence and Erdogan and followed the authorization of sanctions against Turkish officials earlier this week by President Trump. As part of the deal, Pence said that the U.S. would not implement any more sanctions on Turkey and that it would revoke all economic punishments once a permanent ceasefire takes effect. Pence also said Turkey agreed to recommit to countering ISIS and to cooperate with the U.S. on securing ISIS detainees and guarding prison camps in Syria. After Pence's announcement, Turkey's foreign minister said that this is not a ceasefire. We will pause the operation for 120 hours, that's 10 days obviously, in order for the terrorists to leave. That's the Kurdish faction, okay? We will only stop the operation if our conditions are met. Now, the article indicates what to watch. The Kurds must now leave their territory for 120 hours. Asked by a reporter whether there is a future for Syrian Kurds, Pence said that the agreement today ends immediate violence, which is what Trump sent the U.S. delegation to Ankara to do. Okay, so I won't get into all of this, but you get the point. Let's go back as background to November of 2017. Again, this comes from Arms Control Association. U.S. nuclear weapons in Turkey raise alarm. Deteriorating relations between the United States and Turkey have prompted a growing debate about the wisdom of maintaining U.S. tactical nuclear weapons at the Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey, and more broadly about whether to remove all such U.S. weapons from Europe. Although Turkey is a NATO member and Incirlik is a key base of operations for the U.S. air campaign against the Islamic State group, developments over the past year, again this is in 2017, developments over the past year and a half have soured relations and raised security concerns at the base. Those arguing for the removal from Incirlik note that although the bombs do not appear to be in imminent danger of theft or unauthorized use, the risks of storing the weapons in Turkey have nevertheless increased significantly. They also note that maintaining the status quo is unacceptable in light of Turkish President Erdogan's anti-U.S. rhetoric and actions. Okay. On October 14th, in a tweet from Richard Hawes, President of the Council on Foreign Relations and former State Department official in the George W. Bush administration, said the United States, quote, should remove nukes from Turkey and reduce dependence on use of its bases, end quote. Turkey under Erdogan is, quote, an ally in name only, okay? According to open source estimates, the United States may store as many as 50 B-61 gravity bombs at Incirlik. Those make up 1/3 of the approximately 150 nuclear weapons thought to be housed in 5 nations in Europe as part of nations' nuclear sharing arrangements. And again, I'm going to put that map up for you. Come on, there it is. The original rationale for deploying U.S. nuclear weapons in Europe was to deter and, if necessary, defeat a large-scale attack by the Soviet Union. Since the end of the Cold War, the United States has drastically reduced the number of weapons on the continent, but still deploys a smaller number to extend deterrence to NATO allies and as a political signal of the U.S. commitment to the security of alliance members. Okay, so you can look at the rest of this if you'd like a lot of details on costs and that sort of thing for maintaining all of these. The last comment from Axios I'd like to highlight is, unlike the other bases in Europe that host U.S. B-61s, those are the warheads, Incirlik does not have dedicated nuclear-capable fighter aircraft that can deliver the weapons. Moreover, Turkey does not train its pilots to fly nuclear missions. In the event NATO were to make a decision to use the weapons now stored in Turkey, the United States or another NATO member would fly its own aircraft to pick them up. Okay? Okay. This is again the Russia-Turkey agreement for the sale of the S-400. 3 Turkish delegations, and this is coming to us from Debka Weekly. This is March 15th of 2018. 3 Turkish delegations spent 3 days in Washington last week, March 8th through the 11th, rebuffing every U.S. offer of a compromise for ending Turkey's deadly incursion of northern Syria against the Kurds and the Syrian Kurdish PYD parties, YPG militia. Okay, so this Kurdish issue, okay, has been simmering for years now. Continuing with the article, this is what the Trump administration put on the table. 1, the PYD/YPG, those are the Kurds, will provide a written commitment via the U.S. to abjure political and military ties with the Turkish PKK. This is the Kurdish Workers' Party underground. Number 2, Kurdish forces will pull out of the 2 important towns of Afrin and Manjibi, and Turkish troops will not take over any Afrin city. Only their proxy, the Free Syrian Army, or the FSA. For Manjabi, the U.S. and Turkey will set up a joint security coordination. The feasibility of this clause is in doubt, say Debka Weekly's military sources, since Kurdish leaders have warned that if it were implemented, they would retaliate by switching their loyalty from the U.S. to the Russians and the pro-Assad army. The U.S. military would then forfeit its primary ally for ground combat in Syria. Number 3, all Kurdish forces must retreat to the eastern bank of the river Euphrates, leaving none in the west. And number 4, Turkish troops already on Syrian soil and their local surrogates, around 30 Syrian Sunni and Turkmen militia, will remain at a standstill on their present lines and refrain from further attacks or forward movement for more conquests. Okay. Now, much of this is academic at this point because it's almost 2 years old. But it does show you the mindset of the Kurds, that they would switch sides and go with the Russians and the pro-Assad army. The Turks have viewed the Kurds as terrorists. This is why the Turks have wanted to set up a 20-mile demilitarized zone, a safe zone they're calling it, but it's a DMZ. Now, I'm not taking sides with anybody here except the United States. I'm simply indicating that this has been a simmering problem for a couple of years now between Turkey and the Kurds. Okay, let's go to the present time. This is from the Federation of American Scientists. Headline, Urgent, Move U.S. Nuclear Weapons Out of Turkey. This is posted on the 16th of this month. Should the U.S. Air Force withdraw the roughly 50 B-61 nuclear bombs it stores at the Incirlik Air Base in Turkey? That's the question. The question has come to a head after Turkey's invasion of Syria, Erdogan's increasingly authoritarian leadership, and deepening discord with NATO, Trump's inability to manage U.S. security interests in Europe and the Middle East, and war-torn Syria only a few hundred miles from the largest U.S. nuclear weapons storage site in Europe. According to the New York Times, State and Energy Department officials last weekend quietly reviewed plans for evacuating the weapons from Incirlik. Okay, again, this is from the 16th of this month. Now, this includes not just the State Department, but the Energy Department. Department of Energy, DOE, is responsible for the development of these weapons programs, the maintenance of the stockpile, and also the deactivation of old warheads, but also the maintenance and under deployment at these NATO sites and also at U.S. sites in the United States itself. The Department of Energy performs inspections and maintenance and are directly involved in the security of the weapons as well. So they're going to indicate how the weapons could be made safe for transport. Okay, quotation here. Those weapons, one senior official said, were now essentially Erdogan's hostages. Again, this came out on the 16th, folks. To fly them out of Incirlik would be to mark the de facto end of the Turkish-American alliance. To keep them there, though, is to perpetuate a nuclear vulnerability that should have been eliminated years ago. Okay, that's a quotation from State and Energy Department officials. That review is long overdue. The author, parenthetically, Hans Christensen, parenthetically states here, actually, I've heard there have been several reviews and a lively internal debate since the 2016 coup attempt. Okay, that was against Erdogan in Turkey in 2016. And our forces on the base were actually held prisoner by Turkish military forces that surrounded the air base. So this has been a very tense situation. I can well appreciate the mindset of our troops on that air base. Kind of been there, done that. Not to this extent, but I certainly understand their mindset. Let's continue. Some of us have been calling for withdrawal for years, but officials have resisted, saying it wasn't as bad as it looks and that the deployment still served a purpose. They were wrong. And by waiting so long to act, the United States has painted itself into a corner where the choice between nuclear security and abandoning Turkey has become unnecessarily stark and urgent. The situation is even more untenable because Incirlik, in just a few years, is scheduled to receive a large shipment of the new B-61-12 guided nuclear bomb. Understand, the present one is just a free fall bomb. It doesn't have any guidance system, but it's being upgraded. They state here which would be a recommitment to nuclear deployment in Turkey. Well, my personal opinion is it's never going to happen. Incirlik is just untenable in my estimation. And I agree with the author here saying it's untenable. He says here, this year is the 60th anniversary of the first deployment of nuclear weapons to Turkey. It is time to bring them home. And I completely agree with him. The specific reference in the New York Times article made by officials to nuclear weapons at Incirlik is the most recent and authoritative confirmation that nuclear weapons are still stored at the base. That confirms what I have been hearing, and sources at U.S. Forces Europe confirmed the report telling William Arkin the weapons are still there. And William Arkin is the tweet, the segment, the series of tweets that I just read to you that he put out on the 15th about the reinforcement of Air Force security forces being deployed from Italy to Turkey to bolster the security of these weapons. There have been rumors the weapons were removed after the coup attempt in 2016, and some really bad disinformation that they had been moved to Romania. Now, I checked into that, and it was absolute disinformation. That never happened. You'll still see that coming out from Russian broadcast sources, that they were moved to Romania, and they were not. Continuing, all of those rumors were wrong. An article on the official Incirlik Air Base website, Incirlik website, even confirms that the mission of the 39th Operations Support Squadron is to orchestrate and control U.S., Turkish, and coalition forces operated on Incirlik Air Base in the execution of full-spectrum air power and nuclear deterrent operations. Given that the article will likely be removed, now that I've pointed this out, it is reproduced in full below. It's still posted. I went to the website, the Incirlik Air Base, and the 39th Operations Support Squadron posting is still there. And they specifically cite here, their mission is, our vision is to be the U.S. Air Force's premier power projection platform and the wing's agile fulcrum between surety, mobility, and contingency operations. And they state, again, this is from 39th Operations Support Squadron, nuclear deterrent operations. The remaining 50 bombs are for use by U.S. jets, even though Turkey never allowed the U.S. Air Force to permanently base fighter squadrons at Incirlik. Jets would have to fly in during a crisis to pick up the weapons, or they would have to be shipped to other locations before use. As a result, the nuclear posture has been more of a storage site than a fighter-bomber base during the past 2 decades. Now, I'm going into this detail because there's been a lot of confusion about these weapons, and not just whether they're there or not, but can they actually be launched by aircraft from Turkey. And so I'm giving you the details that the specific jets that would be able to carry these weapons for military deployment, for dropping, would have to fly in to the airbase, be loaded, and then fly off to their targets. To fly them out in terms of just removing them, not for deployment, but for removal, they would be flown out by cargo aircraft. Okay? Let's take a moment. I'll take you on a little tour. Again, here's the airbase itself. It is surrounded by the city, suburban areas, industrial areas as well. So it's in the heart of southern Turkey. This is what I was showing earlier at the beginning. Here's a C-17 cargo aircraft or troop movement aircraft, and it would be used for moving these warheads. Many of them would be used for moving these warheads out of the airbase, not for dropping, but for transport purposes only. And this is a satellite image taken this year, 2019. This is detailing the movement of them, and these are shelters that are just above ground. That's not where the device is. It's actually stored underground. And you can't really see it because this is a small picture, but this is an elevator. And here is a B-61 bomb. And it actually comes from below ground by elevator up into the hangar, and then is loaded onto the fighter jet, onto an F-15 typically. Here's the movement in a cargo aircraft. And again, an image comparison here of the two. It's very small, tactical nuke. And once again, a F-15 leaving Incirlik, and this is a nuclear bomb placed in the center line of the aircraft with fuel wing tanks on either side. The B-61 is what's known as a variable yield or dial-a-yield design with a yield of 0.3 to 340 kilotons in various modifications. It has a streamlined casing capable of withstanding supersonic flight speeds. The weapon is 11 feet 8 inches long with a diameter of 13 inches. Its basic weight is about 700 pounds. So these are easily moved by C-130s and that type of cargo aircraft. They could load several of those and move them out in a hurry if they had to. Okay. Just scanning through this very quickly for you. Well, I had something else in here I wanted to read to you, but I don't see it at the moment. Yeah, okay, we'll move along. going to put this image up for you. If you look at the image down below, this is the W-70 on the Lance missile, and this is from back in the 70s. The MGM-52 Lance is a mobile field artillery tactical surface-to-surface missile, tactical ballistic missile. This was developed, the warhead, and that warhead is the W-70 nuclear warhead with a yield, again a variable yield, between 1 and 100 kilotons. And it was developed at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Now, my biological father was an engineer at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. When I deployed to West Germany, when I enlisted, I was deployed in 1977 to a nuclear storage facility. And we were out in the middle of nowhere in West Germany. This was the height of the Cold War. We were told when we in-processed into country, when I arrived at Frankfurt, we were told we were all expendable. They showed us graphics of the number of Russian tanks versus U.S. tanks. It was about a 1 to 10 ratio. They showed us the number of nuclear warheads that the U.S. had in Europe, and specifically in West Germany, compared to those that were known to be in the Russian arsenal. It was almost nuclear parity. It was almost the same number of tactical. We're not talking about things being dropped by bombers. We're talking about artillery pieces, like I'm showing you here. But it's very ironic that my father was still employed at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Again, I was adopted at birth, but my biological father was involved in the engineering of the Lance missile system that I was guarding in West Germany. And I had never met my biological father. Very interesting how these things came about. Lawrence Livermore was a 15-minute drive from where I grew up in Lafayette, California, which was just over the hill from where I went to school at UC Berkeley. Kind of interesting how the Lord dropped me right into the middle of these things. This is the aircraft that I flew in. I was a military policeman when I first arrived in Germany. That was my formal training as an MP. At that time, my MOS, my military occupational specialty, was 95 B10A1. The A1 was a designation for nuclear surety, S-U-R-E-T-Y. So we were guarding warheads as MPs. And why were we flying them? Because in the bunkers we had these old warheads. They were actually dated back to the Korean War, that were high explosive tipped warheads and nuclear capable warheads, nuclear tipped, called the Honest John missile system. Again, artillery, ground-based, truck-mounted missile systems. We were flying the old nukes out in the belly of these old rattle-trap Chinooks, following the Autobahn, flying just over the Autobahn with our warheads, and we were guarded by Huey gunships, and we had MPs in here in the belly of the craft, and we had 2 backup Chinooks full of MPs. And our mission was to fly them. And we were considered expendable because if someone wanted to take the warheads, we were supposed to shoot and kill the enemy, even to our own demise. Whether they attacked us when we were transporting, or when we were on the ground, or when they were in a storage facility, or at the air bases that we were supporting for the launching of them. So we're flying over West Germany with old warheads, and then we're picking up the new ones, the W-70, to be affixed to the Lance missile system. And we'd fly them back, flying just over the Autobahn. And we did that for weeks on end when I was first in Germany. And the public had no clue. Can you imagine doing that today? There was no internet. There was no spreading of information like we're doing. And we're just flying over Germany with nuclear warheads. Now, they were not activated. If the aircraft had crashed, the bomb would not detonate. But there would be the possibility of radiation escaping from the warhead, depending on the amount of damage that was done to it. Our mission, if the aircraft had to suddenly land, or for some reason it crashed or was shot down and we survived, we were to deploy in concentric circles, a hot zone, a warm zone, and a green zone. And we were to shoot first and ask questions later. Those were the standing orders in that kind of scenario. So nuclear surety is taken very seriously. This is in Incirlik today, 2017 to 2019. This Dodge pickup truck, it's a flatbed, is carrying a nuclear warhead, a B-61 warhead. These are the security forces in the convoy, and this is on the airbase. Again, demonstrating how serious these things are taken. This is out in the open and exposed, very vulnerable. Down in the bottom, I'm showing you what are known as the SAT and BAF team. SAT stands for Security Alert Force. The guys that are directly in contact with the warheads, the movement of them. And then the backup alert force known as BAF, so SAT and BAF teams. And we drilled and practiced this with our above ground bunkers in Germany. And these bunkers were bunkers that were surrounded by old Luftwaffe bunkers that had been purposefully demolished by the retreating Germans in World War II. The Luftwaffe, because they stored ammunition for the Luftwaffe bombers and bullets for their guns, their aircraft-mounted guns. And we saw all the bunkers around us when we first arrived there. Huge, massive, thick walls and roofs. And many of them still had munitions in them, even in the 70s. Swastikas on them and the whole bit. But the U.S. built above-ground bunkers in Germany and put the warheads in these above-ground bunkers. Today, they're all underground. Shows you the difference. In the 70s, we had terrorist groups in Germany known as the Baader Meinhof Gang and the Red Brigade. And you may recall the taking of a Lufthansa jet aircraft, passenger aircraft at Frankfurt International. They were taken hostage, the flight crew and the passengers, by the Baader Meinhof Gang. And they ultimately ended up killing the pilot, the pilot in command, the senior pilot from Lufthansa. He lived in the village that I lived in. He was from the village of Babenhausen. And Babenhausen is where the artillery unit that we supported that would have been launching using the Lance missile system, launching tactical nukes. So the Baader Meinhof Gang and the Red Brigade were highly active, and there were frequently the Polizei, the civilian police, would set up checkpoints on the roadway. And they were armed with their automatic weapons. And they were looking for these guys. So we, as the security forces, fully expected, and we got daily briefings on the intelligence, we fully expected that these terrorists back in the 70s would try to take one of our nukes. And we drilled and we drilled and we drilled for this. Not much has changed since the 1970s. Now, just as an aside, about 8 months, I think it was 6 to 8 months after I was first deployed in Germany, I was asked by my commanding officer, because of my background in Oakland, I had been an EMT. We didn't have paramedics in the early 70s in Oakland. I was an EMT for 3 years before I enlisted in the military. And they found out in my personnel records that I had been an EMT, and the only medic we had on our post, and we had 1,100 personnel, 1,100 people, and one medic. He was due to be rotated stateside. So my commanding officer, who was a major for this whole base, just a major, not even a colonel, approached me one day and asked me if I wanted to go through the medic program. If I wanted to go to Frankfurt General Hospital and go through their medical corpsman program, medical specialist. The MOS was 91 Bravo in those days, in the Vietnam era it was called. Of course I said yes. Went through my training and received a secondary MOS. My primary responsibility was what they called the Personnel Reliability Program, PRP. PRP, Personnel Reliability Program, for a medic involved screening physically and psychologically all 1,100 personnel on the base, from the commanding officer all the way down through the ranks. And the medic that I replaced didn't do a very good job. So not only paperwork and equipment and screening of personnel was in a shambles, that was my responsibility to pull it all together before the next IG inspection, Inspector General, which was 30 days away from the time that I actually was awarded my secondary MOS and took on my new duties. So it was a scramble, 7 days a week, long hours, putting it all together. So I had to do the physicals on 1,100 people. I had to do psychological profiles on people. I had to do drug screening. We had a black tar heroin problem that was rampant, and we had an alcohol problem in those days. So I ended up disqualifying well over 100 personnel from the Personnel Reliability Program, because the seriousness of the situation during the Cold War was, we couldn't play games. We had to have reliable people on the post, whether you're a cook, a truck driver, or a military policeman responsible for the direct security of the warheads. So kind of an interesting experience. But during my training on the nuclear warheads, because I also had to screen people physically for radiation exposure. So I had to learn about the W-70s, and that's where I finally heard about CERN, something you guys know me probably initially as my research and reporting regarding CERN. It was just over the hill in Geneva, Switzerland, so to speak, from where I was in central Germany, near Frankfurt. And ever since that point of first hearing about CERN, which its origin in 1953, the ground was broken in Geneva. That was the year I was born, 1953. It was built for the purpose of modeling the yield of nuclear warheads. CERN is all about nuclear research. Okay? So I've been up close, hands-on, literally, with the nuclear warhead, the W-70, with the warrant officers that were responsible for their maintenance and testing of these devices. I've handled the testing equipment. I had been exposed to the testing procedures, just getting to know these guys because I was responsible for them medically. I needed to know how much exposure on a daily basis they were encountering. I also became the nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare specialist for the Post, NBC. So further training on nuclear yields, exposure, fallout, protective equipment, dosimeters, Geiger counters. And I'm sharing all of this with you because I wanted you to fully appreciate the background that I bring to the table when we now talk about science, and now we're talking about nuclear warheads. We're talking about warfare. We're talking about the end times, the end days. We're in Israel, and possibly launching tactical nuclear warheads. Jeremiah 49, Isaiah 17, and Damascus. I think you would agree with me that the Lord, through all of these events in my life, has prepared me for this time to be your researcher and reporter, because I've had firsthand experience in a variety of areas. When I said I could understand the mindset, the psychology of the security forces at the airbase, it comes from that experience with the Baader-Meinhof gang and the Red Brigade in terms of intelligence reports on a daily basis, and understanding the threat persona, the threat picture of terrorists wanting to get their hands on nuclear warheads. The specter of your host country, as it is called. Germany, for me, West Germany was my host country in the 70s. Today, Turkey is the host country for our Air Force personnel. And the concept is just mind-boggling to me that my host country could possibly be a threat to the personnel and to the weapons we're responsible for guarding. It's inconceivable. And now the specter of Russian forces, certainly the Spetsnaz, their special forces, their special operations troops, already in Syria and already in Turkey, assaulting the base and taking control of 50 nuclear warheads, the B-61s. This is why I'm spending so much time tonight telling you war stories, giving you the background of my experience and training, so that you understand that I'm speaking strategically from a position of reasonable expertise. The lessons learned in the 70s in the Cold War are very representative of today's, let's call it a Cold War, if you will, in Syria. Same players are involved. But Russia's already in the host country, something that was completely unacceptable in the 70s. We were shown maps of the various passes coming into West Germany from Russia, through East Germany, through Berlin. The passes where we had landmines already in place, and those landmines were nuclear. These were nukes buried in the ground. to be remotely detonated should the tanks start coming through the passes, through the valleys. And while that was going on, the artillery launched Lance missile systems would be launching the small W-70 nukes, which could yield up to 100 kilotons. Quite substantial, even though they were small in size. But even where we were in Babenhausen with our artillery unit, and my post was called Münster by Dieburg. And if you'll give me a moment, if you'll just allow me, I think I have some other pictures. And these are present day pictures. Let me see if I can find this real quick for you. Yeah. I'm going to take a moment and post a picture for you. This is back in the 70s. Trying to get it to load. I want to show you some old pictures. This is kind of like, you know, the travel log version of a live stream tonight. There it goes. For some reason it just didn't want to. This was a relatively new tower that they erected at the time. Take that out and just put in another picture. Home movies tonight. There it goes. These are the above ground bunkers. Now this is in the present time. These doors are open because everything's been removed, but these were above ground. They're just concrete with earth put over them, somehow to try to disguise them, but obviously. And we would bring the nuclear warheads out of these above ground bunkers and bring them around, and the warrant officers had a building that they would maintain them in. Now I'll take that out. Home movies. This was the entrance to our post. This is a present day image, but this was our main gate before they had this road in and these improvements. But this was a guard area. It's been converted into a pizza place now, but this was where the main gate was, and you'd go into our barracks area back here. The road off to the left went to what we called the back area, and that's where the bunkers were located. I apologize, my program is not really wanting to load pictures for some reason. Let's try this again. Okay. So this was back in the day. This is one of the guard towers, but we had basically a square perimeter around here. This was completely off limits. There was a double row of wire. You can see the wire here, wire here. This was where the guards would walk from tower to tower. This concrete tower is modern, but there are wooden towers. This is a picture taken from one of the wooden towers. And they basically just were, you know, old wood shacks up on stilts. But this was a no-go zone. Anybody that entered through, got through the outer perimeter fence line, this was an area where you would challenge them with the daily password. And if they failed the challenge, didn't give the right password, we would shoot first and ask questions later. This was the inner fence line, and then you can see a bunker over here. And there were 3 rows of bunkers, essentially. So all we had was an M16, a couple of clips of bullets, and that was about it. I mean, we just had M16s, but we had machine guns available for the Sat and BAF teams that would respond out of the guardhouse, M60 machine guns, that type of thing. But we didn't have really anything that you would consider to be heavy artillery guarding these nuclear bombs, nuclear warheads. This was the 6th MP Company that I was assigned to, part of the 544th Ordnance Company, part of the 72nd Ordnance Battalion, and we were part of SHAFE. Okay, so that was our entrance. Show and tell tonight, show and tell. Maybe I'll just do one more, just for fun. Let's see what I can show you here that is representative, that'll tell the story. See if this picture will load. Yeah, this is a much better picture. Again, this is from back in the day. This building here, and I won't show you the pictures for today, I won't take too long, but all of this now is just abandoned and in complete, you know, fallen down condition. But this was where the nuclear warheads were brought in by the warrant officers and where they would go through calibration testing. And then we had an entrance gate over here, and this was the guard shack. We had bunk beds in here for the backup teams, for the guards that were off duty, and for the Sat and BAF teams. And then we had a little control access area over here as well. So there was a gate through here, and then the fences, the fence lines, and a perimeter road. So that was it. Nothing terribly sophisticated. And I don't recall exactly how many warheads, but I want to say it probably was close to 30 warheads we were responsible for at that time. And there were hundreds of W-70 and other types of nukes deployed all over West Germany. It wasn't just my little post. And I had the opportunity for about 30 days to be assigned as the courier to take top secret documents in a briefcase, literally handcuffed to my right wrist with a .45 on my hip because I'm left-handed. And I would drive an M880 Dodge four-wheel drive pickup truck just by myself with these papers and a big thick stack of gasoline ration cards, and I would buy fuel on the economy from the German civilian gas stations, buy gasoline, and my orders were to get on the Autobahn and drive with my foot to the floor. So I would get in a four-wheel drive, which get terrible gas mileage, horrible to ride in at those speeds, doing about 75 miles an hour at best, down the Autobahn until I'd have to stop for fuel, and I would have to get out and pump the fuel myself with a briefcase handcuffed to me and a .45. And of course my uniform said MP and all that stuff. So I was able to go to basically every post, U.S. Army base post, as they're called, Kaserne, as they're known in Germany, but a U.S. Army post, a Kaserne, that had nuclear weapons. and transport those secret nuclear-related documents from post to post. So I visited virtually all of the posts that had nuclear warheads in the 70s in West Germany. And there were hundreds of them. This is how serious the Cold War was. I was 23 years old. By the time I became the post medic, I was 24. Now that's pretty old by military standards. Most of the guys I went through boot camp with in the military police academy were 18, 19, 20 years old. I was 23 when I enlisted after 3 years in Oakland as an EMT. So I was given a lot more responsibility. When I went into the Army, I was already an E3 because I had college behind me. I was an E3. I didn't choose to go in as an officer. So I went through boot camp as an M3, as an E3. I was a platoon leader. And very shortly after I was awarded a secondary MOS as a medic, 91 Bravo, I was promoted to E4 as a specialist, 4th class. The MPs as well as me as a medic, we were all specialists. And these were, MPs and medics were considered to be scarce MOSs. They were desperate for MPs in Europe and desperate for medics. So very unusual for someone in their first 3 years of enlistment to acquire a secondary MOS. That usually doesn't happen until you re-enlist. But these were serious times. So I enjoyed Germany. The German people were very hospitable. I lived on the economy with a German family and rented an upstairs apartment in their home. Spent a lot of time playing water polo because I played water polo in college and in high school. And I was a player coach for the local youth water polo team and got a chance to be a German, if you will. And I'm German and Dutch by descent. That's why I chose to go to Germany. I love the history. So I played water polo for a couple of years, a couple of seasons. Traveled around Germany. Got to ski in Berchtesgaden for 2 seasons. Spent a lot of time in Bavaria in southern Germany with friends of the family that had a 400-year-old farmhouse, still a working farm. And spent a lot of weekends on the working farm, milking cows, cutting firewood for the winter, pitching hay in the barn. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved the culture. So, I had a good time. Good time. I even went to Paris one time with some of my German friends. So now you know a little bit more about this guy that's doing research and reporting for you. Our little travel log, our little step back into history. But the cold hard facts are that things are heating up tremendously in the Middle East. I do think that our nukes in Turkey will be airlifted out by cargo transport aircraft. More than likely, my guess would be that they will take them to Ramstein, and to pronounce this correctly, I never saw this base when I was there, Buchel in West Germany. Buchel, I believe, is how it is pronounced. B-U-C-H-E-L, Buchel. Probably because they already have nuclear warheads that are secured. It probably wouldn't take much to squeeze a few more into their existing bunkers. I don't expect that they'll be removed back to the U.S. Domestic, back to the mainland. They'll be deployed, they'll be maintaining the deployment of the nukes in NATO countries. And I do believe that Turkey's going to separate itself from NATO of its own accord. I do believe that they are going to be close allies of Russia, that more Russian troops are going to move in and more Iranian troops, because there is a defense agreement between Iran and Russia. It's been in place for years. And therefore, it will be the Turks, some of the Syrians that are left, the Russians, Iranians, that whole mixture are going to come against Israel. I do not think that the Russians will use nukes against Israel. I think it will be conventional, but it will be overwhelming. We have Hezbollah and Hamas from the Palestinian-controlled areas with thousands of small rockets. They're not missiles necessarily, they're rockets. There's a difference. The rockets are very small and have a small, high explosive warhead at the best of them. But the Iranians have on their home turf short-range, nuclear-tipped, make no bones about it, Iran has nuclear warheads and the delivery systems. I believe it will be nukes from Iran if there are any nukes coming, but I think it will initially be conventional warheads, but Israel responding almost immediately with tactical nukes into Syria. And Tehran. Israel has said that they have weapons systems that they've never disclosed that have the capability of wiping out Tehran and other strategic civilian and military bases in Iran. And the Bashir nuclear power plant and research facility right on the coast. Those are the primary targets. Bashir nuclear power plant and Tehran that Israel will go against. So I think we're going to see the attack initially from Syria upon Israel, but then a two-pronged response in the immediate to Damascus and Tehran by Israel. And Tehran, when they detect the launch from Israel, will then launch their nukes from Tehran and other locations in Iran itself, will launch their short-range nuclear-tipped missiles. And it will be a full-on nuclear exchange upon Israel. And it will only because of God intervening, as we see in Scripture, that Israel will even survive. Scripture tells us that Israel will be victorious, but only because of God, not because of their military might, not because of the IDF, but because the Lord will intervene. God himself will intervene on behalf of Israel. So to go to Andy's question early on about the use of nukes, that's the scenario that I envision. Probably shouldn't use that word. It's not a vision, not an envision, but that I would expect. So, I would urge you to pray. The most powerful weapons system that God has created, more powerful than nukes. Prayer. We command the spiritual forces in the name of Jesus Christ. Use that power. We know that Scripture's going to play out. We know it is. But pray for the humans that are involved. No matter the country, no matter the religion, no matter the ethnicity, pray for the humans. Pray for their salvation. There's going to be war. There are going to be nukes. So your target is their soul. Pray for their salvation. Pray that all that is coming forward now, that's being revealed, that it causes people to turn their faces and turn their hearts and minds to God, the one and true God who created us, to turn to the Lord for salvation. We know that Syrian Christians are being persecuted and slaughtered. And Christians will continue to be persecuted and slaughtered in the Middle East. Pray for their souls. Pray for the converts who don't openly identify themselves as Christians for fear of persecution and execution. Pray that people in these areas that are it's absolute existential threats, that they come to know the Lord. That's the best we can do for them. This is not a spirit of fear. This is a spirit of coming against the Antichrist spirit. We know that eventually the Antichrist will reveal himself, and the majority of the world is going to call the Antichrist Christ, as I shared with you from Matthew. We know it's coming. Again, I kind of did the travel log and gave you some background on my own experiences, because I think the Lord has equipped me in my life of 66 years to be able to share these insights and to share these expectations, this extrapolation of events. Not trying to be a prophet and not claiming to be behaving like a prophet. I'm trying to be very pragmatic and analytical and take my experiences and my training and my exposures and apply them to the events of today, so that I can share it with you. Perhaps you can take some of what I'm sharing with you in your own words and your own experiences and abilities and reach out to others and share the gospel. Do it firsthand. Do it personally. We're commanded to occupy. Occupy means sharing the gospel. We have to do this. We're commanded to. But we should do it from our heart. Do it from a point of sincerity, not just going through the motions of it. This is my way of sharing the gospel. This is how I occupy. And I thank you for your financial support in my mission. But I'm reciprocating back to you for your benefit that which I've learned and experienced, so that it will help you with your mission and help you with your spreading of the gospel, your evangelism, if you will. Okay? Let me allow some time for questions here. Okay. Tamara? Tamara, I see your question back there that you're going to email me. Okay. Just checking the chat room here. Yeah, George, I appreciate you kind of running down the background on the nuclear warheads. Yeah, there is a specific set of tools physical hands-on tools that have to be turned. There are dials that have to be set. This is, again, the warrant officers that are trained to do this that I was involved with in Germany showed me this, even with the W70. But even the B61 today, these have to be armed. You've probably heard of triggers, nuclear triggers. Okay? These triggers actually have to be set up and initiated. And then a gravity bomb, a dropped bomb, as opposed to a guided bomb that can glide and have steering vanes that are steered by a gyroscopic system, a guidance system. But even a gravity bomb, unless you've activated the trigger mechanism, it won't go off. You can certainly have plutonium and other radioactive materials, but weapons grade uranium that can leak radioactive material depending on the type of damage that the device has sustained. But usually when these drop and they're in hardened cases, they don't really leak. We've had many nuclear devices in the United States itself where the bomb has been dropped. It wasn't armed, but it's been dropped accidentally from an aircraft, or an aircraft has actually crashed. And there are many, at least a dozen, that are unaccounted for here in the United States. But they've not leaked radiation. So they're pretty robust. And it does take hands-on setting up of the triggers so that when they are dropped, they will, of course, detonate upon impact. But the the B61, as I indicated at the beginning, these are bunker busters. They're earth penetrating. They will penetrate through hardened concrete and steel and arrive at the interior of a bunker facility, and then they will detonate inside. Okay? So the W70s were basically just surface detonation or airburst. They were set up differently, but airburst would be over the troops themselves. Some of them were designed to, upon impact on a target, to detonate. But in the European theater, most were designed for low altitude airburst for maximum effect upon troops themselves. Okay? Alrighty. Deborah asks, why do you think people should steer clear of prophecy conferences? Very, very good question. Reasonable question. I have myself been a speaker at 2 prophecy conferences. I wasn't speaking about prophecy, I was speaking about what I do here. That's science and technology. I found it to be much like a circus environment, and I'm sorry, but I know I'm going to be offending people who go to the conferences and offending the speakers themselves, and many of them that I've communicated with and been with at the conferences, of course. But to me, it was like a circus environment, and it was presenting information in many cases in a theatrical, in a funny, in a hyped up manner, which I didn't feel was appropriate. We're talking about serious matters and should be presented in a serious fashion. That there was also a sense of fear-mongering. Serious doesn't mean promoting fear. It just means being deliberate about the delivery of your information, sticking to the facts without presenting a lot of theory and conjecture. and promoting fear and consternation. I also took exception. I had my book at the time, Revising Reality, at the second conference. I had the opportunity to sell some of my books. I only brought one case of books, and they sold out immediately, which was nice. But then I gave my empty table to the gentleman next to me, whose table was just piled full of merchandise, and there was this whole area of just merchandising. And I really took exception to that, because I felt like people that were there as presenters and speakers and their entourages were there to make money off of people. I sold my books, but I sold a case of them. I wasn't there to make money. I was making it available as a convenience factor for people. But I really felt like it was a carnival and carnival barker atmosphere. And so I've washed my hands of going to conferences. I spoke at 2 of them. People were very nice to me, very receptive to the information. I appreciated the opportunity to meet a lot of people that I had watched for several years. But I came away with a very poor sense of what was going on. And I'm sorry, that this offends people. It's just my own personal observations I'm sharing with you. I am a different kind of a guy. I understand that. I'm a different kind of personality. I view the world very differently than most people. And I'm objective about myself to recognize that about myself. My poor wife, she sure tolerates me. I appreciate her patience. But I guess I just don't fit in. And I'm being very personal with a lot of things tonight with you. I didn't really plan it to be this way, but it's turned into kind of a personal exposure of who is Anthony Patch. And that's okay. To use the overused word, trying to be transparent about who I am. You have a right to know that. But the topics of these conferences seems to me to be, and I get the information from people that attend them, and they tell me about them. They send me clips. They send me personal recordings from there, et cetera, et cetera. And it just seems like the same information that is repeated over and over and over again. Yes, you can repeat scripture. You can repeat prophecy. It needs to be, because you're going to have new people who've not heard it before, and you need reinforcement. That's part of teaching. I get it. But it gets a little tiresome to hear the same fear-mongering, and not enough of preaching the gospel. It's why every live stream I cite the gospel, the good news, and encourage that we pray and encourage that we go out and witness. By whatever mechanism you can witness. Because for all the evidence of evil that I present, the bottom line is we do this for the salvation of souls. And unfortunately in the conferences, it's so much a focus on prophecy, and of late, in the last couple of years, so much a focus upon Israel, focus upon the evangelicals supporting the Jewish state, the Zionist state, that has really created some heartache for me. This is not about Christians converting to Judaism, and yet that is replete in these prophecy conferences now. Blindly supporting Israel, this whole evangelical message that Kathleen and I have been sharing with you, especially the last live stream on the last Sunday that Kathleen was talking about her personal experiences with the leadership in the evangelical church movement. It's this conversion to Judaism that I take exception with when we talk about blindly supporting the Zionist state, a political idolatry worshiping, false idol worshiping Zionist state that at the heart of it is Kabbalists. These are Kabbalists, and the evangelicals are not aware of that, the rank and file. And in the prophecy conferences, which is primarily made up of evangelicals, they are not exposing Kabbalah. They're not exposing the political Zionist state. So I have a variety of reasons why I have a problem with prophecy conferences, and I thank you for asking the question. It's a fair question, it's a legitimate question, and I'm happy to be transparent about my feelings. Okay? But it should be cause for you to be a good Berean and do your own research. Don't take my position, don't take my prejudice, if you want to call it that, or call it a misrepresentation. That's fine. Be a good Berean. Study for yourself what is going on, what is being presented. But do it objectively. Take the personalities, take the hype out of it. Take the affinity for certain people. Take it out of it. And look at the messages. Look at what is being spoken about. Okay? Yes, I know they talk about Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49, which I cited as well about Damascus, and Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog. Totally understand that. Needs to be repeated. But it has to underscore, reinforce the gospel, the good news, and the salvation of souls. Has to. Has to reinforce that there's only one true Jesus Christ, the only true Messiah. To blindly support Israel, which is involved in idolatry and mysticism and wizardry, they are deceived. We know that their scales are over their eyes in Israel, and they are expecting the return of their Mashiach. They're hastening the return of their Mashiach, which is the Antichrist, and they want to build the third temple. And in the prophecy conferences, they talk about supporting Israel in the third temple. I'm sorry, I have a problem with that. And yet I'm not sorry. It needs to be brought up fairly, deliberately, dogmatically, calmly, factually, so as to prompt your own research into these things and what people are pushing. This is not a personal attack against any of the speakers. It's the messages and the deception that's going on regarding Israel that I have a problem with. Okay? Let me see what else we've got. Andy asked the question, where is Kathleen this evening? She's out having dinner with a good friend of hers, lady, okay? A lady friend of hers this evening who invited her out to dinner, so she's enjoying that. She'll be back home tomorrow, and Sunday she'll join us for the live stream. So I'm flying solo, and because I'm flying solo, I guess I had to tell you all my backstories, all my war stories. Okay? Yeah, alrighty. '94 Bravo, Spoon, Deborah. So 94 Bravo, Spoon, I'm assuming that was a cook when you say spoon. You know, let me mention food since you brought it up. This again, I'm being completely transparent tonight with you guys. Before I joined the Army, I hated pizza. Couldn't stand all that cheese. When I went to boot camp, most people were losing weight. When I went to boot camp, because I had been a swimmer all my life, and I went to Berkeley on a swimming scholarship and played water polo and swam on the swimming team, and I was in really good condition when I went in the Army. In fact, I had an armband that said, I had the 3 stripes for an E3 on one, black armband with the stripes. And on the other, I had another armband that was SJ. I can't believe I'm telling you guys this. SJ for Super Jock. Because you went through all of this testing and evaluation on your physical ability, your physical condition. And I didn't know anything about it. My platoon sergeant came up to me and said, "Hey, you just won Super Jock for the company." I went, "Really? I had no idea." Anyway, I was gaining weight in boot camp. Everybody else, because they were out of shape and going through all of the PT, the physical training, were losing weight. Well, I loved the Army food. We got 3 meals a day. I never ate breakfast growing up as a kid because I had to be in the pool by 6 a.m. every day. So I never ate breakfast, and I didn't want to eat breakfast. I had lunch and dinner. When I went in the Army, they mandated that you ate breakfast. And I found out I loved Army food. So if you were a cook, 94 Bravo, that's pretty cool because I enjoyed the food. Let me see what that, if that's what you were a cook. Okay, you were a cook. Good. So I enjoyed the Army food, and they had pizza. And I discovered I liked pizza when I was in boot camp. And that carried over into Germany. When I was at Münster-Dieburg in the middle of nowhere, down the road about a half a mile was this little guest house, German guest house. Not a whorehouse, okay? It's called a guest house. Basically, it was a pub. And you could get pizza and beer and all that stuff, and we would always walk down there. And that's before I ended up living on the economy with a German family. But me and my buddies, when I first got there, we would go down to Ludwig's. We'd have pizza and beer. And I never liked pizza until then. So now you know an awful lot more about me, probably more than you want to know. Okay? But I wanted to commend you on your cooking. That was the point. Army food was good. I don't know what people have a problem with it. I enjoyed it. And we got lots of it. And we were hungry in boot camp. And when I went to the MP Academy, we were hungry. A lot of physical training. And when I was in the MP Academy, there were 5 other guys. We had a group called the McClellan 6. That's what we called ourselves. Fort McClellan, Alabama. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for boot camp, which is now the military academy. Military Police Academy is now at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, now has the MP Academy folded into it. Fort McClellan has been shut down for many years in Alabama. But my buddies, in the afternoon, we would go out and run. We had physical training in the morning with the whole company, but in the afternoon we were so bored, we were going through a self-paced program. We could go through the academy training as fast as we could pass the exams at various modules. And we were way ahead of everybody else because we wanted to get out early, and we focused, and we were in a study group, the 6 of us, and we helped each other out. So we had a lot of time in the afternoons, and we'd go out and run. So I was always hungry. And I was in good shape. And I enjoyed being in good shape. It was great. All right. Joyce, Adam Green from No More News. I really like Adam Green and No More News. I've learned a lot from him, and he has been focusing on Kabbalah. We presented Deanne Loper's book on the Kabbalah, and I think it was about a week later that Adam started talking about Kabbalah. And he's done a very, very good job about talking about that in the Zionist state and the deception happening within the evangelical community. So, big endorsement, Adam Green, No More News. Excellent resource. Thank you for bringing that up. Israeli News Live. Kathleen and I were on, we were guests, as you know, as you're saying, on Israeli News Live with Steve and Jonna. The problem I think we encountered, unfortunately, was we brought up Daniel and talking about geomancy. And we revealed things that they shared with us after the conversation that created some real problems for people in their audience and financial supporters of their ministry. And so we've not been asked back on. And we lost a fair number of patrons because we were talking about Daniel and geomancy and what Daniel was trained in. And we've expanded upon that. And we've tried to explain, and Kathleen has explained extensively about Daniel from a scriptural standpoint, but also from the scholarly works. I mean, again, we have I've got a dozen books over here that we're using to understand about the time of Daniel. And this is the book that we are going to be working on during Christmas, the Christmas holidays, because Kathleen works for a school. She has a couple of weeks off during the Christmas time. And we're going to be producing this book, that's our goal, about Daniel, how he was trained as a young teenager, what he did in the court, in the kingdom, what he was schooled in, so that we make this very clear. But that created some problems for the supporters of Israeli News Live, and it's too bad, because I respect Steve and Jonna. I respect their research. I respect their ministry. I don't have a problem. I endorse what they're teaching, and they've been teaching about Kabbalah as well. But like myself and Kathleen, we respect you as our supporters. We respect you. We respect your likes and dislikes. We respect your perspective on Scripture. And you're always bringing up, hey, where is it found in Scripture? Absolutely necessary. But we also present extra biblical sources so that we have the context, we have a bigger picture, and therefore a greater understanding, a deeper understanding about the times, about the people involved that are cited in Scripture. They work together. They really do. They work together. And it's that increase in knowledge that is the dynamic of today. That Daniel was told to close up the books, seal up the books until the latter days. Well, those books have been opened, and that results in greater knowledge, greater depth of understanding of the Scriptures and the participants in Scripture, like Daniel. Okay? I'm not trying to change Scripture, not trying to take away or add to it. Certainly we don't want to be heretics, and we're not trying to blaspheme. We're learning. As you are helping us to learn, and we're learning with you, it's a give and take, and we share each other's learning curve here. So, okay. Excellent. Thank you, Shalom. I'm glad you found us through Israeli News Live. Again, we would love to go back on and have a conversation with Steve and Jonna. They're wonderful people. We really would. Anthony, would you make your book available in MP3 or thumb drive for people like me who don't particularly like to read? Yes, we will, Tamara. Absolutely. George, the Red Brigade set off a bomb inside the PK near an airbase close to that 2 weeks after that explosion. I declined to visit that military on base department store. Yep. Well, the Red Brigade and the Baader Meinhof, they were a pretty well organized, fairly sophisticated group of terrorists, and in the truest sense, they were. This is when, for those that weren't around at that time or may not recall, this is when airliners were prone to being hijacked. This is when all the hijacking activities were going on in the 70s. And, I went to the funeral for the Lufthansa pilot in command, the #1 pilot, who was assassinated in the cockpit of the aircraft. If you look up that particular hijacking event at Frankfurt International Airport, you'll see the pilot. He's slid the side window open and he's gesturing, he's signaling out the window of the aircraft in many of the photographs. That's the gentleman who was killed, and I attended his funeral in Class A military uniform. We, as military police, we were the color guard in the village of Babenhausen, the little town of Babenhausen, Germany, where he lived and I lived. I lived just down the street from his family, and we were in the honor guard for his funeral. It was readily apparent that these terrorists were active and that they were in the communities that I lived in, and the Polizei were out to get him, and they had all of the checkpoints on the roadways, and you'd pull into the side of the road and there's guys with submachine guns, just like in the airports at that time in Frankfurt and in Ramstein, which is next to it. You'd walk through the airport, civilian Frankfurt International, and Polizei with submachine guns, automatic weapons. It was serious stuff. Serious stuff. So, all right. All right, guys. I think we'll wrap it up for this evening. It's been a little more than 2 hours. Thank you again for allowing me to kind of, elaborate on my history and elaborate on what's going on. I certainly pray for peace in the Middle East, for the whole world. Okay? Please send me your prayer requests, and Kathleen as well. We are honored by those, and we will fulfill those. Any questions you may have, including Tamara, please do. Tamara, I did watch that video as I responded to you in the email, and happy to do so again. So, pay attention to Syria, folks. Things are going to be moving quickly. Turkey's going to be moving quickly. Russia's coming in. Absolutely. And they're going to be bolstering the Iranians that are already there. It's moving fast. Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, will be in Israel on Friday, meeting with Netanyahu. And maybe they're going to finally get around to this peace deal of the century, the peace agreement. Maybe they'll reveal it. Maybe we'll see what's happening. A lot to pay attention to. Thank you for sending me your articles. There have been a lot of science things that have been coming in. We'll get to those as well. Okay? Anyway, thank you. God bless. And Lord willing, we'll be back together on Sunday, Kathleen and myself, for the live stream. Good night.